Hello. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate that. Live and streaming. My name is Nate Leaf, and on behalf of the Har HaShem Disability Awareness and Inclusion Committee and the JFS Jewish Disability Advocates, I welcome you to tonight's Chronic Health Conditions panel discussion. I want to thank everyone who had a hand in putting this panel together. First and foremost, the panel members. They have been put through a lot of time getting their speeches, working together with myself, and I personally thank you for being a part of tonight's discussion. Next, I want to thank the committee I was on, chaired by Bonnie, I think her last name's Leaf, and Erica Baroque, who has been instrumental in the constant support and leadership, and that's why we're here today, so thank you guys very, very much for that. Tonight, we are live at Har HaShem and also have a streaming audience. For our streamers, anytime during the presentation, you can submit questions to the panelists, and you can see we will have a question and answer period after. The number to text, and if you can look too, you can write it down, it'll be around, for your questions or comments is 303-880-6644. 303-880-6644. You can also use email for your questions and comments to inclusion, INCLUSION, @harhashem.org. That's inclusion@harhashem.org. Now the fun part. We are so fortunate to have 5 members of our community willing to share their insights and experiences about living with a chronic condition. Our 5 speakers from my left are Barber Gould, Max Weiner, John Stephen, Jackie Stephen, and Barbara Garrett. And once again, thank you very, very much for being part of this panel. Tonight's first speaker is Barber Gould. Barber is married to Alan Taggart. They have a son, Sam, who is married to Amanda, and a daughter, Rebecca, who was married this past summer to Brian O'Connell. Sam and Amanda have a 1-year-old child who they named Sully after the doctor that saved Barber's life. Barber has been a social worker for 40 years and worked at Har HaShem for many of those years. Barber is one of the people who started the Boulder Safe House and has been very active in the area of domestic violence. Barber has also been active working with people in the process of conversion to Judaism, interfaith family issues, and end of life, as well as grief counseling. Everybody knows Barber is a rock star. Now let's hear Barber's story.
Okay, it's on? Okay, good. So I'm just going to read this so that I don't wander off and I don't take too much time. In mid-March of 2020, before there was testing or much experience at treating COVID.
Okay.
Me? Okay. Sorry, folks.
Okay. There's always take twos. That's good.
There we go. This about this close, okay?
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Real close.
That's really close. Is that better? Okay. In mid-March of 2020, before there was testing or much experience at treating COVID, I became ill after a flight from Atlanta to Denver. We didn't have any protocols at that time in this country. I was masked, wearing a surgical mask, but no one else was, and the man behind us was very ill. I developed a bad cough, and on April 7th, I was hospitalized at Boulder Community Health. I went downhill pretty quickly and was intubated by April 10th. At one point, it looked like I was getting better, and then came the cytokine storm. Cytokine storm, in medical terms, is everything failed all at once. It's like everything just gives up and says, nope, I'm done. And I was dying. I was airlifted to UC Health, and I was put on a machine called Ecmo. Ecmo is a lung bypass machine. Does all the work that your lungs do. It recycles your blood and recycles it back into your body. UC Health accepted me even though I fit none of the criteria for Ecmo. So I'm very grateful to them. They called it a Hail Mary. We called it a Hail Miriam. Or I should say, you all called it a Hail Miriam because I was in a coma, but still. I was on Ecmo for 15 days, which is a really long time to be on a machine like that. And on day 12 or 13, I started to fail again. And my family was told that within a couple of days, I'd have to be removed from the machine. So that night, Har HaShem held a prayer circle via Zoom with about 200 people, I'm told. And Buddhist friends held chanting circles. Friends of ours connected to churches all around the country were all praying. And the next day, doctors came in and said, you know, we really can't explain what happened, but looks like she's doing better. And I can't explain what happened either. I know that I had outstanding, amazing doctors who were willing to take risks and be experimental. But also, I understand too that positive energy and love really matter. And I started to improve. I was off the machine in 2 more days and went to a long-term acute care hospital to be weaned off the ventilator. It's called an LTAC for short. By that time, I had been on the vent for 65 days. At the LTAC, I learned to breathe again with supplemental oxygen. All of my muscles had atrophied, so I had to relearn how to swallow, how to move my eyes. I mean, whoever thinks about the muscles in their eyes, but I couldn't move my eyes. Walk with a walker, I had to relearn how to speak. I lost all of my hair also. After 3 weeks there, I went to a rehab hospital, UC Health in Broomfield, and came home on July 14th. So I had been in the hospital for 92 days. Continued with rehab through mid-2021. So to talk about chronic issues, I guess the big one for a lot of people who have dealt with COVID, whether it's been serious COVID or sometimes mild COVID, brain fog. And brain fog doesn't mean that you just walk into a room and say, oh, why did I walk in here? Or that you are looking for your keys and you say, gee, where are my keys? I mean, there is that, but there was also that before COVID. Some say it's similar to chemo brain fog. My brain just does not work like it used to. It takes me a bit longer to figure things out. I have word retrieval problems, memory loss, executive function issues such as the ability to multitask and plan well, fatigue, which is more than being tired. It's just a full body exhaustion. And anxiety, that is a sort of global, free-floating anxiety unlike anything I had ever experienced before. There's such a thing called PICS, Post-Icu Syndrome. And it's why a lot of people who have been in long-term ICU end up having to be in psych units for a while, because the anxiety is completely overwhelming. I shake. I can't form words. I sort of stop in my tracks, and that's it. I have an amazing therapist who is guiding me through all of that. At some point on Ecmo, my liver did not get enough blood, and I have progressive incurable liver disease. I will need a liver transplant. I'm too healthy to be on a list for that right now, but the disease is getting worse, and I anticipate that I'll be on a list within a year or two. I will probably have to find a living donor, which is a fairly complicated thing. With liver disease comes full body itching, bruising, stomach distension, which of course is really lovely, and the possibility of sudden emergency situations. But through all of this, our family realized its own strength, more than we ever knew. My husband, my children, and their spouses became a team. And then when I was conscious, I became part of that team. We take one day at a time. We see the beauty that surrounds us. We make a point of seeing that. We continue to be advocates for social justice because we always have been. We make a point of seeing friends and family often. We are living our lives as fully as we can. The challenge of accepting this new reality, this new baseline, is pretty daunting, and I don't love it. The notion of having to rest, that I can't do everything on my own, I haven't accepted that yet. I don't know that I will. We grieve for the lives that we had before this, but we've also learned to appreciate the things that we used to take for granted, like each other. Har HaShem was with us from the start. Rabbi Green was an amazing support to our family, as was Holly, as was everyone. My family never wanted for food. I was in the hospital for 92 days and then home. And for 2 months after I got home, for all that 92 days and the 2 months after I got home, we had meals every single night, and sometimes more than once a day. Community matters. This community matters. And I think that there's so much that we can do to understand what's going on for those of us who come here, who need to be here, and who have some chronic issues going on.
Wow. Thank. No, you just passed it to Max. Barber, thank you very much. Thank you. Next, I am privileged to introduce Max Weiner. Max has just recently joined Har HaShem, and I am proud to say is now a member of the Har HaShem Disability Awareness and Inclusion Committee. Max works part-time as a law clerk doing legal research, is very passionate about Judaism, supporting those in need in the community through volunteer work, his friends, of course his dog Smokey, the outdoors, and lifelong learning. Max is a chronic illness survivor. He has chronic fatigue syndrome and a rare headache disorder called New Delhi persistent headache. Max volunteered to speak because he truly believes how important it is to talk about chronic illnesses and disabilities and what we can do as a community to be more accepting of these with disabilities and chronic illnesses. Max, thank you, and let's hear what you want to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and thanks for sharing, Barbara. And yeah, I'm really thankful that you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm gonna start my timer here because I want to make sure I don't go over my time. But so I want to talk about. I have chronic illness. A lot of the symptoms that Barber talked about in terms of brain fog, and I also experienced chronic daily headache and fatigue and a lot of other symptoms. And I chose to not really focus as much on my symptoms and things like that. I really want to talk about the stigma about chronic pain and chronic illness in our country and kind of where that comes from. And it ties into my story as well. And as I tell that story, I'm telling my own story as well, but I want to talk about it from more of a sociological perspective, because I think it's a story that really needs to be told, and I feel like it's the message that a message that really needs to be told. So I've got my notes here because I'm not good at speaking off the cuff, but so in the United States, stories of chronic illness and chronic pain are mostly untold. I think this is because these stories don't fall into the traditional American overcoming adversity narrative that is presented to us by Hollywood, history, and media. The chronic illness experience is generally not the typical feel-good story of getting sick or hurt, battling back, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, healing, and going back to a life of success and health. There's elements of that in the story, but the journey is often more nuanced and complex. Because it doesn't fit into these typical media presentations, because many of us look healthy and able, stories of chronic lifelong illness seem strange and unbelievable to many, which is understandable because the idea of lifelong suffering is very uncomfortable to sit with, and there's also a lot of silence around suffering in our culture. So kind of growing up in this environment, it's difficult for people to understand the concept of having a lifelong illness that you don't necessarily conquer. So I want to talk a little bit about chronic pain, because most people don't understand what chronic pain is. It's much different than acute pain, where you hurt yourself and your body tries to keep you safe by shutting you down. So chronic pain, actually, from a scientific perspective, is a disease that is separate from the initial injury. It's a disease of the spinal cord and the brain. And there's actually many things that can cause chronic pain other than an injury. It can actually happen without any injury. It can happen as a result of a virus or a bacterial infection. We're seeing a lot of people with COVID now developing chronic pain for months and years, even though there was no injury. Often people that have surgery develop chronic pain even if the surgery was done properly and it was successful. And a lot of people that have chemo treatment for cancer develop chronic pain for years. So building on this research, there's now hundreds or even thousands of studies on chronic pain. So despite all the research, it seems that people have a difficult time understanding that people can be in pain without any clearly visible injury. And then some within the medical and the wellness communities continue to promote stereotypes that stigmatize chronic pain and chronic illness. Conditions such as fibromyalgia, headache, CFS, and neuropathic pain have been recognized for decades, but and are covered by insurance, but there's still a massive stigma. Some physicians still look at chronic pain patients as weak or as attention and drug seekers. There's also some stigma that comes from the wellness industry that kind of promotes the idea that of mind over matter, that if you raise your vibration or do certain wellness practices, that you can cure yourself of any chronic illness. And this has really always been out there, and we kind of saw this thinking when COVID was happening. There was a lot of kind of alternative stories going on in terms of magical cures and things like that. This was always around, but COVID kind of brought it into the mainstream. So the kind of the result of all this stigma in society is it drives people underground and into the closet. People that have chronic illnesses are sometimes blamed for their limitations or illnesses. Some of the things that I've heard are, it's all in your head, you're a weak person, you are what you think, you choose your story, choose to be healthy, and you will be. So this is kind of what you run up against. And then also within this cultural landscape, we also live in a city that really worships financial success, athletic ability, and looks. So those with invisible or poorly understood and stigmatized illnesses often mask, gloss over, or lie about why they don't show up to things or can't do things and what they're experiencing, which unfortunately only adds to the silencing of the story. Many times it's just easier to pretend to be healthy rather than dealing with the stigma and shame. And it's sadly ironic that we are sometimes told we're pretending to be sick where we're really pretending to be well. It kind of creates a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation. If we're honest about what we're going through, if we're honest about what we're going through, we're called attention seekers or self-centered, but if we withhold information, it just seems like there's nothing wrong. So if we show up and do normal things from time to time when we're feeling decent, then some folks say there's nothing wrong with us. If we don't show up, we're not trying hard enough or making excuses for ourselves. The stronger we get and the less we show our suffering, the more it seems like we're fine. So in terms of what I'd like to share and of what the community can do to help people that have chronic illness, what I wanted to say is that healing is more than what occurs in the body through lifestyle modifications and medicine. There's also a deep healing in being seen and validated by your community. We are radically interconnected, and COVID taught us that. When you don't have to hide yourself because of stigma and shaming, it is healing to feel supported and seen. So what can you do? I'd say radically examine and perhaps redefine what you think disability and chronic illness are and what you think you can perceive about someone else's health. Most disabilities and illnesses are not visible. Many are dynamic, and what that means is that you can accomplish more, sometimes more or less on any given day. And there's also a heavy price to pay for everyday things like going out to dinner or concert. So if someone tells you they have a chronic illness, I'd say maybe Google it, learn more, ask questions about how it's affected that person's life and the limitations it places on them. So my time's up, but thank you.
Wow. Max, thank you very much. I mean, you gave a lot of us to think about and to act on and to pursue. Thank you once again for being here. Our third speaker is John Stephen, and no matter whether it stays, it's John. And this is our little joke that we've been going through. John is married and has 2 daughters. He and his wife Suzanne, who's in the audience, have been members of Har HaShem since 2005. Both of his daughters had their bat mitzvah at Har HaShem. John, along with his 2 daughters, Sophie and Jackie, have type 1 diabetes. John was diagnosed at a very early age and has seen a significant change in the way that diabetes is experienced over the course of his life. When John was in college, many people mistook his insulin pump for a pager. Some people still do, although not everybody knows what a pager is these days. Now it's time to drop our pagers and listen to John talk about the changes in the treatment, options, and technology with diabetes. Here's John. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to the committee for inviting me and giving me a chance to share a little bit about diabetes and my story. And Max, I also want to say I really resonated with a couple of points you made, especially with the point that chronic disease is often sort of unseen and it's not really visible to most people. And I also resonated with the idea that it's something that a lot of people have trouble understanding, that you just won't get better and that you can't heal yourself, but that it is something that you just have to navigate throughout your entire life. Both of those points really hit home for me. So thank you for sharing your story as well. Yeah, so to follow along Nate's introduction, the technology and the way that I am able to address and sort of live with diabetes has changed drastically over the last almost 50 years. When I was originally born, the tools were incredibly rudimentary, and there was no way to understand what your blood sugar is, which is sort of one of the key things that you track and check to understand how you're doing with your diabetes care. The best you could do was to look for sugar that was in your urine and understand whether there was sugar there. But if there was any sugar in your urine, it already meant that your blood sugar levels were really high. The other challenge I had was that we really didn't have very good insulin back then. And the insulins we had, sometimes it would like start to act really quickly and would have a really big effect, and other times, just depending on the batch of insulin or maybe just depending on what was going on in your body, it would take a really long time and have a really low effect. And so it was really, really challenging when I was a young kid to sort of navigate this. And I have to give my mom a tremendous amount of credit for like trying to figure this out when I was too young to do so myself. You know, she sort of, I think half jokingly but half seriously says that her goal at that point was really just to keep me alive. But I'm really glad that she did. I'm glad that she put in that effort because things, you know, they did get a little bit better. And by the time that I was about 10, there were some improvements. There was insulins that were a little faster acting and more stable, and so they would be a little more consistent. And the really big change at that time was there was the ability to test your own blood sugar at home. And that was sort of like the first of the different diabetes revolutions that I've experienced, because then you really got a good feel for what was happening, and you could see the effect of, oh, if I eat something, this is what happens to my blood sugar, and then the next time, no, oh, I need to give myself a little bit more or a little bit less insulin. So this was really the first time you really felt like you had any ability to have any control over what was happening. And so that was, you know, it was helpful, but it was still hard, you know, and it was still a lot of days where I didn't get it right, and I would have a really, you know, intense low or be really high, and either one of those, you just don't feel good. And like Max sort of alluded to, right, you'd feel really terrible, but everybody else around you might just think like, oh, like, what's wrong with him today? He's just really like frustrated or angry, and they don't really understand the why behind that. You know, and the really then the next or the second sort of leap forward with diabetes happened when I was in high school. And I was one of the first people, I think I was like the second person in West Virginia to go on an insulin pump. And this was like really, truly like miraculous because it allowed me to do a couple of things. One was that the insulin more closely mimicked how your bodies produce insulin. And so it sort of created an insulin delivery profile that was much closer to what the normal body is like. And so that meant that a lot of those things that where I was trying to like guess and chase after blood sugars and that kind of thing were a lot easier to do at that point. But really the big difference, the really big thing that happened was I could give myself insulin pretty much whenever I needed it. I carried it, you know, the insulin was carried around in the insulin pump. It had tubing, it connected to me, you know, it was visible. But any time that I then ate something, I could give myself insulin. And that insulin would cover the amount of carbohydrates or sugar in what I ate, and it gave me a tremendous amount of freedom. You know, up to that point, you were supposed to eat pretty consistent times of the day, and you know, it wasn't the same thing every day, but sort of consistent amounts of proteins and fats and carbohydrates and, you know, fruits and vegetables and that kind of thing. The insulin pump really like allowed me to behave much more like a normal kid and yet still care for my diabetes. And so, especially, if you can think about what it's like to be a teenager, where you're really trying to fit in and trying to be normal, and Jackie probably could relate to that. It was really hard with diabetes prior to that, and the insulin pump still made me stand out a bit, right? It, like Nate said, it looked like a pager. Everybody wondered, why does this kid have a pager? Is he all of a sudden a drug dealer or something? But I was willing to live with that because of that additional freedom it gave me. But it also did call some attention to my diabetes at the same time. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but sometimes that attention is okay, and sometimes, it's also a little bit frustrating. But then the next revolution or next big development in diabetes care was the development of something called a continuous glucose monitor. And the big deal about this is that it's attached to you. It has this small little wire that goes under your skin that you change about every week to 10 days. But it measures your blood sugar all the time, continuously throughout the day, right? And so instead of having to test my blood sugar anytime that I wasn't feeling good and figuring out, is my blood sugar too low? Is my blood sugar too high? Is my blood sugar okay and I'm not feeling good for some other reason? It really gave me a tremendous amount of additional information about what was happening with my body. And that was great because then it eliminated some of that guessing I was still having to do with diabetes. It gave me more information. It allowed me to more tightly take care of in diabetes land, they call it control, but really it's just do a better job of matching the amount of insulin you need to what you're eating and the exercise you're getting and all of that sort of stuff. And having that ability to see that throughout the day rather than whenever you would test your blood sugar really just made things a lot easier. It wasn't like the insulin pump where it was I can eat whenever I want, but it gave me a lot more knowledge and information, and that was really helpful to me. And the most recent development, I won't say that this is revolutionary, it's more an evolution of where we've gotten to, but they've now gotten the insulin pump and the continuous glucose monitor to talk to each other. And so they can gently sort of increase or decrease the amount of insulin you're getting based on what your blood sugar is doing. And it's not completely closed loop. I still have to pay attention to my diabetes. I still have to make sure I give myself insulin when I eat. But it helps take the edge off of some of those high blood sugars or low blood sugars that I would get. And just sort of helps smooth things out a little bit. And really the benefit of that is it makes me feel better during the day. Instead of having really high blood sugar and feeling terrible and being super thirsty. And usually when my blood sugar gets high, I get super irritable. My blood sugar will go up, but it won't get super high. And so I sort of avoid that really frustrated, snarky, sort of miserable kind of feeling. And so I think it's good for me, but it's probably even better for the people around me and my family and that sort of thing, who don't really have to deal with that. So there's been a really great improvement. And I look at, where I started out, and the things that I dealt with and sort of where Jackie and her older sister Sophie came into this. And I'm very thankful, right? Because they sort of came in at a place where a lot of the tools are already there. They're still teenagers, so they have to choose to use them themselves. But at least the tools are there, and it can make their lives a little easier. And I'm also sort of excited and thankful because if I've seen all of this technology, get us to this point, I'm very hopeful that at some point in the future, it will continue, and that ability to really more tightly get these different parts of all the diabetes technology working together will make it I won't say that just the same as somebody who doesn't have diabetes, but really allow us to get much closer and have a lot more freedom and flexibility. But I mentioned earlier I wanted to sort of talk about that other piece of diabetes, the piece that that diabetes technology made more present and more visible And that's really like the sort of misunderstandings that people really have around diabetes. When you have like an insulin pump and you're giving yourself insulin, or before I had this continuous glucose monitor and I had to test my blood sugar, you would often get people asking you, like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? And how people approach that is quite varied. There are some people that are really sort of curious and understanding, and I appreciate that, right? Because they're just sort of asking, like, hey, tell me more about this. Let me understand what's going on with you and sort of understand what you're dealing with. But unfortunately, there are a lot of other people who are feel that they understand and know the answers, even though they may not even understand the type of diabetes that I have. There are actually two different types of diabetes out there. Type 1, which Jackie and I have, is an autoimmune disease. Your body actually attacks the cells in your pancreas that make insulin. And that's never going to go away, right? Like, that is truly a chronic illness. There's also type 2 diabetes, where your body starts to become insulin resistant and can't use the insulin that you have as well as it used to be able to. And that's often seen in people who are more overweight, although it actually does occur in people of all body sizes and all body types. It's not just because you are overweight that occurs. But a lot of people don't understand that. And I've definitely had people say to me, well, if you lost a little weight, couldn't you get rid of your diabetes? I mean, it's not like that I'm like that big to begin with, but, no, sorry, it's not going to work that way. And a lot of people who will say, like, hey, you can't eat that. You have diabetes. Why are you eating that? So I think the real key is in your community and when you're engaging with people, talk to them, understand what they're really dealing with and what they're going through, so that you can figure out how to support them and help them, rather than going in and really just, telling them what to do.
John, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Jackie Stephen. If the last name sounds familiar, you're a good listener. Jackie is the youngest daughter of our previous speaker, her dad, John. And interesting with this is when I ask who should go first, Jackie says, I'm following my dad. This was Jackie's choice by far. And she's smiling and she knows that. Jackie has been a participant in the Har HaShem community her entire life. When she was young, the family came to family services. She attended religious school at Har HaShem and enjoyed summer camp with Leah and Caroline. She became bat mitzvah in early 2021 at the height of the pandemic. Now Jackie reads from the Torah at Saturday morning services. Jackie currently is a freshman at Peak to Peak, plays the bass trombone in their high school honor band, and plays piano in their jazz band. Jackie was diagnosed with diabetes when she was 8 years old. Jackie, thanks for being here, and let's hear your story.
All right, let's get to it. So ever since I've been a baby, I've been in several studies about diabetes, like the Teddy study and TrialNet, because, like it was mentioned before, both my sister and my dad have diabetes. So sometimes I would randomly test my blood sugar just to make sure it was in the normal, non-diabetic range. Leading up to the point, the studies I was in had shown some markers that could possibly lead up to a diagnosis, which in my case, they did. One day over the summer, I decided to test my blood sugar before coming to the day camp through the synagogue. Weirdly enough, my blood sugar was high, which is one of the symptoms for diabetes. My parents decided to wait until after camp to test again, and my blood sugar was even higher than before. We went to the ER, and after a blood draw and long hours of waiting, I was diagnosed with T1D. I immediately started on shots, and after a couple months, I went onto a tubed insulin pump. Currently, I'm on the Omnipod system. It's a Bluetooth setup, so there's no tubing involved, and I have to change it about every 3 days. Every school year, I have to notify my teachers about my diabetes and give them a bag with juice boxes and a tube of cake decorating frosting in case of emergencies. All of my friends know about my condition and frequently ask me about how I'm feeling or what my blood sugar is at, especially if my mood is off, like I'm not particularly interested in an activity or I'm noticeably shaky. People in the congregation have supported me by paying attention to and accommodating to my needs. When I was in Sunday school, the teachers would always make sure I had water if my blood sugar was high and sugar if it was low. They were also super accommodating when it came to lunch options. They would always make sure I knew the carbs beforehand and sometimes get special food just for me so the carbs could be calculated correctly. One thing I wish people would understand about me and my diabetes is that I'm not going to be able to do things 100% of the time. Around 5% of the time, I'm not going to be feeling great because my blood sugar is high or low. I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee all of my effort is put in. Since being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I've learned that I need to really pay attention to how I'm feeling. Even though I can feel great, my blood sugar can be high or low. I've also learned that I need to put my health first. Sometimes I tend to put other people and school before my well-being, and it always ends up with my blood sugar in a place I don't want it to be. In total, my friends, my school, and my congregation have been helpful and accommodating about my condition and never hesitate to show support when I need it.
Wow. Thank you, Jackie. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Our final speaker tonight is Barber Garrett. Barber has been a member of the Har HaShem community since she moved back to Colorado with her family in 2000. She has been married to Jack since 1981. Barber likes to describe herself in multiples. Multiple children and grandchildren, multiple four-legged loves, multiple hobbies, multiple career paths, multiple locations lived, and now multiples she will share with us now. Here's Barber. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you like loyalty cards? You know, the kind where you buy 10 or 12 beverages and you get that one free? Or you spend so much at a store that they give you a coupon for $20 off your next purchase? Well, I want a loyalty card for injuries, diseases, and illnesses. And this is how it goes in my mind. A broken arm, half a punch. Scrapes and scratches and stitches in childhood, no punches. Hit by a car with a brain concussion and chipped skull, one punch. Graves' disease with radioactive iodine to destroy the thyroid, another punch. Multicentric infiltrating ductal carcinoma, HER2 positive, breast cancer, with neoadjuvant chemo, surgery, and radiation in that order, 4 punches. Myotonic dystrophy type 2, an autosomal dominant progressive disease that is affecting my heart along with muscle degeneration, 5 punches. Not knowing if I pass this disease on to my children, too many punches to count. And my card is now more than full. With this full card, I want to be able to opt out of any further diseases and diagnoses. I am done. I have a full card, and I don't want to deal with anything more. My mother's Alzheimer's, my father's Parkinson's. They need to stay away from me. I've got all I can deal with. Despite the eventual decrepitude and betrayal of my body, I remain loyal to it. I try to feed it well, with limited sugar that can feed cancer. I walk miles every day trying to keep as strong as I can, even though I can't prevent the airplane flying above, and the certainty of needing a walker and then a wheelchair. Loyal and working to hunt the good, I am fighting to stay strong for my grandchildren, four-legged loves, and of course, family and husband. Unless you see me struggling to walk on an incline, climb stairs, try to get up from a lower chair, car, or floor, I look well, but appearances lie and I'm plagued by ill health. I don't share my difficulties with most people or complain about the continuing muscle pain, digestive issues, and fatigue from the neuromuscular disease. Only the heart issues will slow me down and cause cancellation of commitments on a bad day. Someone told me that a loved one in her struggle with cancer said she felt so alone, knowing that no one knew what it felt like to be her and her body with her pain because everyone is so different. While I appreciate the caring sentiment underlining the words, I don't want to hear how your friend beat cancer or got well with certain diets or supplements. We are each different, and the person with the illness makes their own very personal choices and orchestrates their own care. Some, like me, try to learn the medical vernacular, read what I can in the medical literature, and even argue with the doctors. Others will trust the process and the healthcare system and not work to learn more. Some may reject medical care entirely or choose alternative care. It is a personal choice and should be allowed to be that, regardless of the outcome. So many things I can't control, and here are some of my frustrations. Most physicians can't be expected to know about all of the rare diseases out there. There are just too many. To make it worse, myotonic dystrophy type 2 is abbreviated DM2. So I've gone to the doctor before and had the doctor say, "Oh, you have diabetes." Nope, just the same medical abbreviation. I take care guidelines provided by the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation to any new physician I see, and take anesthesia guidelines with me from the same foundation to any procedure, to any appointment requiring anesthesia. The healthcare system does a poor job of integrated care with physicians in different specialties not talking with the others to assure me the best care. Instead, I bring reports of my visits of the many specialists to other doctors so they are better informed of my problems and needs. Despite laws for accessibility, I cannot open the newer handicap assist doors that do not actually assist until they are partway open. I get angry when the escalator and elevators are both not working in a New York subway. I can't open the tamper-proof pill containers or even the THC edible packaging. Sidewalks are not always safe places to walk. I prefer to walk on concrete or hard floors as opposed to grass, trails, or carpet. It feels more reliable for a walking surface until it isn't. Sidewalks with raised cracks are serious trip hazards. I tend to walk with a downward gaze to see any irregularities along the way. When I see them, I try to step over the raised areas or walk in the street instead. Sometimes I just don't see what's coming and stumble. Sometimes I see what is coming, and my brain tells my leg to lift higher to get over the potential hazard. Try as I might, sometimes my leg just doesn't listen to my brain, and it feels as if there's a hand coming up from below the concrete, reaching up and grabbing my foot, and there I go flying. Don't get me started on why the handicap bathroom stall is often the furthest from the door, and the neurology department at the hospital is way down long hallways furthest from the elevator. The more I talk with people, the more I realize we all have our battles. Some are mental or emotional, some are physical. Not all are visible or easily recognizable. Some are here for a short time, and some with us for the remainder of our lives, however long that may be. Some are mildly challenging when they begin and then progressively interfere more and more with any and all of life's tasks. The choices for how we live those days are personal and individual and should not be judged. It is a difficult balance to offer to listen, to offer support without saying or implying what someone should or shouldn't do. The choice to run from death or push towards life is personal. I can't run at all, but but I will walk one slow step after the other towards life, at least for now. Walk with me at my pace and without judgment, and I will be grateful for your being there. Sometimes I can talk all about it, and sometimes I just need to focus on living. If you are curious and want to ask me questions, that's fine, but please first ask if I'm up for talking. And if I say no, please don't take it personally. Just be there for those who struggle daily. There are more out there struggling than you can imagine. Here's one version of a famous Chinese proverb. If you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. If you want to be happy for a month, get married. If you want to be happy for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want to be happy for a lifetime, help somebody else.
Barber, thank you very much. That was incredible. Now it's time for questions. Are there from anybody from the audience want to ask? We'll have 10 or 15 minutes for that. Okay. And we'll just pass the microphones around so people then can answer, and obviously I'll give mine up. So any questions that people are willing and able and wanting to? If not, then
Thank you all so very much. That was really moving and impactful, and each of your stories, I think, added tremendously to understanding what it is like to live with chronic health conditions, although knowing that everyone has their own story. I know one of the members of our Disability Awareness and Inclusion Committee who also has chronic illness. She has severe migraines and a severe mold allergy. She wanted to ask, are there ways in which you have grown? I know some of you have kind of indicated that throughout the talk, but ways in which your condition has allowed you to grow or explore new things or learn in a way that you might not have before.
So I think for me, one of the big things was when my daughters were diagnosed, right? That it allowed me to see sort of that same disease, but through somebody else's eyes. And it really created the realization that it's different for everybody. You may have the same exact, sort of thing going on, and yet it's completely different for Jackie than it is for me, than it is for Sophie. And so that was really something that I won't say that I wished for that to happen, but I'm thankful that I got to understand that a bit better.
I've grown as a person by understanding that popularity isn't everything, because the people who are so cool and so popular are really just biatches who don't care about you. And it's made me realize that they won't care about me, they won't care about my diabetes. They're gonna judge me for it, and I'm better off finding friends that actually care about me.
I would say that, it definitely teaches you a lot of patience, and that you're kind of forced into this kind of state of humility where, you can't always do what you want to do on a certain day or at all, really. And so it does kind of foster humility, which is probably better to get it from something other than being chronically ill, but since you have it, it's good to learn from it. And also, I think, just being non-judgmental to other people for sure, and just recognizing the limitations of your sensory ability in terms of knowing what someone else is going through, I think, can be healing for other people. So.
I think I've learned quite a bit about my own personal strength. I never thought of myself as a particularly strong person. But this experience has, I guess, changed that view to a point. I struggle still with the sense of feeling frail, but also recognizing that I had to have some fight in me in order to be here. And I'm still trying to discover what that means. But I think as you just said, Max, also a greater sense of patience and understanding of that we never know what's going on with another person. We just don't know. And assumptions are not good things. Patience and loving kindness make a difference.
Okay. Anything over there? Yes.
Hi, I'm just wondering if Jackie's mom would like to add anything raising two children with conditions.
I'll admit, I was the one that said, dude, why are you having a beeper in college? You're 19 years old. Give me a break. True love. That's how it started. Raising two kids with diabetes has honestly, having John, there since we've known each other since he was 19, I was 20, made, quite honestly, the diagnosis less impactful. We have seen families, quite honestly, implode. Divorces, children leaving households, separations, mental breakdowns. We have seen it all. And the perspective that I had is, okay, John, you had this. Let's make sure we give the kids all the resources, all the outlets, and all the opportunities for advocacy and education. Both Jackie and Sophie in 2019 traveled to Washington, D.C. with the JDRF Children's Congress. They were identified as two of the three delegates for the state of Colorado. They met with Representative Polis, or excuse me, they met with Senator Gardner's office, they met with Senator Bennett's office, and they actually met with Joe Neguse personally to talk about the renewal for the special diabetes program. Jackie has raised probably $5,000 to support research for the JDRF. John has raised probably close to $5,000. Sophie started early. She's raised closer to $30,000 over her lifetime riding and participating. And so my thought and process on this is, you know what, you have something, you need to make other kids' lives better. You need to make other adults' lives better by educating them. You are fortunate to have great resources, medical resources, excellent doctors, excellent health insurance. You need to give back to your community. And so that's kind of how I've approached it. And I always say I'm the one with type 3 in the house.
Oh, thank you for that. We're almost out, but I'd like to have like one last question, and that is, in what ways have your friends, families, and colleagues been able to support you?
I realized through my whole little talk I didn't say much about my husband, Alan. I mean, the truth is, had it not been for his advocacy, and hold the mic up here, got it, all right. Had it not been for my husband's advocacy and my kids, who knew how to navigate through big systems, who weren't intimidated by big systems, who weren't intimidated when they were told that I wouldn't be eligible for Ecmo. Had I not had that advocacy, I would be dead. And the truth is that not many people, I mean, he's a lawyer, so he is able to think on his feet even under great distress. Both my kids are advocates in other ways and can navigate through systems. We became very aware of the injustices for others who are not able to do that, who maybe don't speak the language, who are scared to talk to doctors and social workers. So there's that very basic thing. Without them, I'd be dead. The other thing that's so important is not so much how they supported me and how this community supported me, but how they were supported. My husband's job is a hard one because I still need care, and I will for always. So this community embraced them. My friends, my goodness, were in touch with them every day, several times a day. Just seeing them, being with them was so important. So it's not just the person who's sick, it's or the person who's struggling. It's how that struggle impacts everybody.
Okay, I'll try and make it quick, Jackie. I just want to say, for me, one thing that's been really beneficial is to find a community of other people with diabetes who you can share experiences with and who have a better understanding of sort of what you're going through and can sort of share some of those highs and lows that you experience, both sort of literally and figuratively. And one thing that I was fortunate enough to do as a kid, and both Jackie and Sophie were able to do, is to go to camp for a week, like actual residential camp for the kids in the mountains of Colorado, and spend a week with a ton of other diabetic kids who were able to do all the fun camp experiences. And it also gave Suzanne and I a really nice break from having to worry about their diabetes, 24/7. So having that community of sort of people, they may not be undergoing the exact same thing that you are, but that can sort of really relate to what's going on has been really helpful for me.
So yeah, like I've mentioned before, my friends have always been really supportive of me, and especially my boyfriend. He's always asking hey, how's your blood sugar? Is it high? Is there anything I can get you? Is there anything you need? And pretty recently, he's also been asking me, did you bolus for that when I'm eating something? And I swear, I should start calling him my mom instead of my love. But he's always been super supportive, even when we were just, in the talking phase. And always asking me what I need and how he can help.
Congregation Har HaShem has been blessed to have Holly with us for so many years, and she really helped me on my journey. In addition to Holly and our other panelists, family is just the top for helping you through difficult times. I was amazed when I was diagnosed with cancer, my kids' reaction. Cancer is so out there now that, particularly breast cancer, that they were non-phased. Mom, you'll be fine. And there didn't seem to be any concern at all. They weren't shocked that I didn't have hair anymore. They or hard to face them. I don't know. My sister and other family really did a wonderful thing for me and made sure I got to one of my top spots of where I wanted to visit before I depart. And and we have a glorious time, and I have lifetimes of memories. So for everyone else, well or not well, you make best of every moment and work to create memories. Thank you.
Well, this went quick, and first, before we go, thank the panel for being here and sharing these incredible stories and about yourself and your life. And I just want to personally thank you for being here and sharing it with us. Thank you very much. Last, I want to thank everybody for spending part of their Wednesday with us, and have a good rest of the evening. Drive home safely, stay healthy, and we're here. Have a great evening.